Okay, let's get right into it, because today we are looking at something that feels like it's been building for a long time, sort of in the background of our screens.
For years, really.
We're talking about that specific, and let's be honest, sometimes really uncomfortable moment where the glossy, red carpet world of entertainment, it just slams headfirst into the gritty, complex reality of political act.
It is a collision, and I mean, it feels like it's happening with more and more velocity, and frankly, the wreckage from that collision is becoming impossible to ignore.
It really is.
Yeah.
So for this deep dive, we're going into a stack of materials all centered around this recent surge of Hollywood protest, specifically activism targeting ICE immigration and customs enforcement.
Right.
But we're not just looking at, the official press releases or the curated Instagram stories. Our main lens for this, our primary source, is a brutal breakdown for the Pop Culture Crisis channel.
Pop Culture Crisis is really the key here. They put out this whole discussion, and the title alone tells you everything. It was Hollywood Continues Nonstop Virtue Signaling Against ICE.
Says it all right there.
It really does. And it serves as our anchor for this whole conversation. What's so fascinating about their take, though, is that they aren't just engaging with the politics of immigration. That's not the point.
No.
They're engaging with the performance of the politics, the theatricality of it all.
Right. And that's really the mission, you could say, for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We are not here to debate border policy. That is a whole other very complicated show.
A very different show.
We are here to explore how these entertainment figures, people whose literal job is make-believe, are engaging with these incredibly heavy, real-world issues. So we're going to look at the specific actions of people like John Leguizamo, Ariana Grande,
Lady Gaga, Ice-T,
Bruce Springsteen, and even Giancarlo Esposito. There's a pretty stacked cast list.
It is. And the central tension that the source identifies right from the jump is so crucial to all of this. It's this fundamental conflict between the celebrity lifestyle, which is hyper-capitalist, it's exclusive, it's meticulously managed.
Right. It's a brand.
It's a brand. And that brand is colliding with the revolutionary, burn-it-all-down rhetoric they are suddenly espousing. Doesn't quite line up.
It's the Gucci revolutionary paradox.
Right.
But, okay, before we get to the individual characters, we really have to set the stage, because the source is very clear that this wave of anti-IC sentiment, it didn't just appear out of a vacuum.
No, not at all. The source contextualizes this very heavily around the events in Minneapolis. That was the catalyst.
And it just triggered this massive domino effect across the entire culture.
It did. But what's so interesting is how the source describes the pressure cooker environment that came after. It wasn't just that people wanted to speak out. It was that the digital landscape shifted so dramatic that silence started to feel like a massive liability.
Silence is violence, that whole thing.
Exactly that. And they mentioned something about online censorship too, didn't they? With Gracie Abrams.
Yeah, that was an interesting point.
The source brings up celebrities like Gracie Abrams, who were apparently deleting their TikToks because the platforms themselves were cracking down on ICE-related content.
So you've got this weird push and pull.
A total push and pull. It creates this backdrop of tension where you have celebrities who feel like they're being censored by the platform, but at the same time, they're feeling this immense social pressure from the silence is violence narrative.
So what does that do? It pushes them toward more extreme, louder declarations just to try and break through all that noise.
Exactly. Everyone starts shouting to be heard, and everyone is desperately trying to prove that they are on the right side of it.
Which brings us perfectly to our first major character study in this whole drama, John Leguizamo.
And this is where we see the source introduce the concept of the ultimatum.
Leguizamo came out swinging. I mean, he didn't mince words. He issued a statement to his entire fan base that was essentially, if you follow ICE, unfollow me, don't come to my shows, don't watch my movies.
I mean, just stop and think about that. It's an incredibly bold strategy for an entertainer.
It really is.
And the source material draws this really specific, really interesting historical parallel that I think is vital for us to stop and unpack for a second.
Okay.
They compare Leguizamo's ultimatum to the whole Comicsgate era, the sort of collapse of the mainstream comic book industry back in the late 2010s.
Right. I definitely heard that term thrown around a lot, Comicsgate. But
yeah.
Break down the mechanics of that comparison for me. Why is a Hollywood actor comparable to a comic book writer in this specific context?
So it's all about the fundamental relationship with the customer, the person who buys the ticket In the late 2010s, you had these major creators at Marvel and DC who, for all intents and purposes, stopped trying to sell to their audience.
And started trying to do what instead?
They started trying to discipline them. They would go on social media, on Twitter, and explicitly say things like, if you voted for this person, or if you hold these political views, do not buy my book. I don't want your money.
Which, just from a purely capitalist business 101 standpoint, sounds like complete insanity. You are voluntarily shrinking your own market.
You're standing at the door of your own store and telling potential customers to go away. It makes sense. And the deep dive insight here from the source is that this strategy historically fails spectacularly. In the comics industry, that exact rhetoric directly correlated with a massive implosion in sales. Comic book stores closed down. Revenue
So the source is arguing that Leguizamo is essentially engaging in that same kind of economic suicide pact. He's prioritizing a certain kind of moral purity over the actual viability of the product he's selling.
Exactly. He's not just an actor in a movie anymore. In that moment, he becomes a salesman who is actively telling customers to leave the store.
But this is where the source gets really, really cynical or, maybe just realistic about how Hollywood actually works. Leguizamo says, don't watch my movie. But the source immediately fires back, buddy, you've already made your money.
And that is the absolute crux of the financial reality check here. John Leguizamo's salary isn't tied to the box office receipts of a movie that's already in theaters or streaming on Netflix.
He already cashed the check.
The people who are really sweating when a star says, don't watch my movie, are the producer, the studio, the investors.
I love the mental image the source paints here. You've got these producers sitting in a fancy boardroom just panicking, thinking, wait, we spent $100 million on this film, and our lead actor is on Twitter actively campaigning against our own ticket sales.
It's a studio's absolute worst nightmare. It creates this impossible situation for the marketing department. But what's so interesting is how the source material highlights this really resilient, almost stubborn attitude from the audience's side of the equation. One of the commentators on the channel, a guy named Tim, had this response that I think perfectly encapsulates the modern consumer mindset. He basically said, joke's on you. I just watched John Wick and enjoyed it. Checkmate.
Wait, unpack that checkmate logic for me. Because usually if you boycott something, you feel like you won by not consuming it. He's saying he watched it and he won.
Yes. And this is such a fascinating application of what literary critics, they call the death of the author, but it's being applied to a political boycott. The argument is essentially this. I paid for this product. My enjoyment of this movie is mine. It happens in my life.
And your political opinion as an actor cannot penetrate my living room unless I allow it to.
Precisely. So by watching the movie and enjoying it, despite the actor's specific instructions not to, he is asserting a kind of dominance over the transaction.
He's separating the art from the artist, but like by force.
Exactly. By force. He refuses to be alienated. It's a way of saying, you are the jester in the court. Your job is to entertain me. Your opinions on my personal politics are completely irrelevant to this business transaction we're having.
That is a really cold way to look at it, but I totally get it. It's a defense mechanism against being preached to all the time.
It is. But the source also points out that Leguizamo himself isn't exactly standing on the firmest ground when it comes to his own career choice. There's a bit of a consist problem.
Right. This is the moral consistency argument they bring up.
Yeah.
Leguizamo has been, and to be fair, rightly so, very vocal for years about Hispanic actors getting typecast, only getting villain roles. He frames it as a systemic racism issue in Hollywood.
Which is a very fair point. I mean, that has been a historical trope for decades. There's no denying that.
Right.
But the source immediately points out that John Leguizamo plays the main villain in the movie Violent Night.
Which, for the record, was a really fun movie, and he was great in it. He was a fantastic villain.
But the source argues that you can't really stand on that moral high ground of complaining about Hispanic actors being pigeonholed as villains while you are actively accepting, performing, profiting from those exact roles.
It feels like he's trying to have his cake and eat it, too. He's criticizing the system while simultaneously cashing very large checks from that same system.
Exactly. And that gap, that chasm between the rhetoric and the reality, is the running theme through this entire deep dive. And if Leguizamo's gap was about business and artistic choices, our next subject's gap is about something much more fundamental, basic daily survival. We need to talk about Ariana Grande.
Boy, ice out. This segment of the source material, it was scathing.
It really was. So just to recap for everyone, Ariana Grande gets on her platform and endorses a nationwide ICE.
Okay.
She calls for it to happen tomorrow.
Tomorrow, like with less than 24 hours notice.
0 notice. And the demands were very specific. There were 3 of them. No working, no attending school, and no shopping.
Okay, let's just pause on the logistics of that for a second. A pop star, one of the wealthiest entertainers is telling the entire country of 330 million people to just stop the economy with a day's notice.
It's the modern let them eat cake of activism.
Yeah.
It's so fundamentally out of touch And the source material immediately jumped all over the no shopping rule.
I remember this part.
They were cracking jokes like, okay, does that include eating? Am I allowed to go to the drive-thru and get a hamburger, or is that shopping?
It's a funny point, but it highlights just how little thought went into the practical reality of what she was asking. But the satire went even deeper with what they call the doctor's note concept.
Yeah, the commentators were joking about how you'd need a doctor's note signed by Ariana Grande herself to hand to your boss as your abs work.
Sorry, can't come in today, sir. Ariana said so. Here's a note.
I mean, that image is hilarious, but it exposes a genuinely painful class divide. The whole critique from the source is that wealthy celebrities have this immense social huge megaphone.
But absolutely no authority.
No authority and no mechanism to protect the actual working class people they are calling to act.
Right. If I'm a shift worker at an Amazon warehouse or a waitress or a construction worker, and I don't show up for my shift because Ariana Grande told me to go protest, I get fired. Period. I lose my job. I might lose my health insurance.
And she doesn't. She faces zero consequences. She has a team of people handling her schedule, her finances, her entire life. There's no risk.
And that leads the source to discuss the only possible scenario where this plan of hers actually works, which is the rise of what they call the activist HR manager.
Okay, I wanted to ask about this because it was such a specific cultural observation. They mentioned seeing hyper-political HR managers on TikTok. Is this a real phenomenon?
It is, or it's a specific cultural archetype the source is identifying. They're arguing that in the corporate world, the role of human resources is shifted.
Shifted from what to what?
Well, historically, HR's primary function was to protect the company from legal liability.
Yeah.
It was job number one. But recently, the source argues we've seen this shift where HR departments, often staffed by younger, more politically active individuals, start to view their role as enforcing a kind of social justice within the corporation itself.
So the source is saying that unless you happen to have one of those bosses, a boss who is more interested in the cause of the day than, your actual productivity, you are completely out of luck with Ariana's plan.
Exactly. If you work for a tech startup in San Francisco with a very activist corporate culture, hey, maybe you can take the Ariana Grande day off and your boss will cheer you on. If you work in, manufacturing in Ohio or retail anywhere, forget it.
It frames activism as a luxury good, something only the privileged can afford to participate.
That is a perfect way to put it. And what's really interesting is that one of the commentators in the source actually admitted that if Ariana Grande could somehow guarantee him a day off from work, he would absolutely take it.
Yeah, I remember he was like, hey, I'll take the day off since you're openly calling for everyone to just not show up to life. He didn't even care about the cause.
He didn't. And that, again, completely undercuts the seriousness of the protest she's trying to organize. It becomes about the absurdity of the request itself, rather than the actual issue of immigration enforcement.
It turns the protest into a meme, a joke about getting a day off work.
I think I'm definitely seeing a pattern here. With John Leguizamo, it was a fundamental disconnect from the audience's wallet and how they spend their money. With Ariana, it was a total disconnect from the audience's workplace reality, their need to, pay rent.
It's a widening gap of relatability, a chasm, really.
Exactly. But if Ariana Grande didn't seem to understand the concept of an hourly shift, our next subject seems to have lost track of where she is on the actual world map.
Yes.
We're moving from the class bubble to the geographic bubble. Let's talk about Lady Gaga.
This was the distance and irony segment of the source material. So Lady Gaga made this very emotional, very heartfelt statement. She said, quote, "My heart is aching thinking about the people, the children, and the families all over America who are being mercilessly targeted by ICE."
Okay, it's a serious sentiment. I have no doubt she feels it deeply, but the source focuses almost entirely on where she was when she said it.
She was in Japan.
She was in Japan. Why is that specific location so significant to their argument? Why does that matter so much?
Well, the source points out that Japan serves as this perfect dark foil to the American immigration debate. Japan has some of the strictest, most exclusionary immigration policies in the entire developed world.
We hear that a lot, but give us the explain like I'm five version of Japanese immigration. How strict are we actually talking about here?
We are talking about a country that, as a matter of national policy, prioritizes cultural homogeneity above almost everything. It's a very different worldview than the American melting pot idea.
So what does that look like in practice?
It looks like a rigorous, almost impossible points system for skilled workers to get in. It looks like them accepting a minuscule number of refugees each year compared to almost any Western nation. And they are incredibly swift and unapologetic about deporting anyone who overstays their visa or breaks the rule.
The source used a visual metaphor for this, right?
They did. They talked about signs in Japan that basically imply you can only come in if you already know how to read this sign. It's a very closed system.
So the irony is it's palpable.
Ooh.
You are physically standing in a country that enforces its borders with extreme prejudice, a country that essentially has the ICE system on steroid. And from there, you are criticizing your own country for enforcing its borders at all.
It's the disconnection argument all over again. The source argues that to do an anti-border enforcement protest from a country with some of the strongest borders in the world just shows a profound lack of self-awareness. It feels like she didn't even look out the window of her hotel room before hitting send on that statement.
But hold on, let me play devil's advocate for a second. One of the commentators in the source did try to defend her a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
They said, well, look, she had to say something. The idea being that the pressure was on, everyone in her circle was jumping on the bandwagon, so she had to participate regardless of where she was on the globe.
That's true, they did bring that up, but the counter-argument from the other comment, who seemed to have some background in live performance, was really.
What was their take?
They noted that usually an artist saves the cool, the relevant messaging for the location where it actually applies.
Right. You save your Chicago material for the Chicago show.
Yeah.
You don't do your jokes about the Chicago Bears when you're performing in Tokyo. It just doesn't land.
It doesn't land, exactly. And doing this very specific American domestic policy protest material in Japan just felt misplaced to them. It felt like checking a box on the activism check rather than a genuine, organic engagement with the audience right there in front of her.
It felt, in a word, performative. And speaking of performance, and maybe specifically bad, we need to talk about Hayley Williams from Paramore.
Oh, this was a pure visual critique from the source, and it was brutal. So there's this video that was circulating where Hayley Williams stops a concert mid-show to make a political statement.
A statement about what?
About Trump and something called Project 2025.
Okay, before we get into the whole reading part, for any listener who might have tuned out the political noise lately, can we just quickly define what Project 2025 actually is? Because it's become this massive, scary-sounding buzzword.
Right. In the simplest terms, Project 2025 is a big set of conservative policy proposals. It comes from the Heritage Foundation, and it's basically a playbook intended for the next Republican president. It involves things like restructuring the civil service, changing how regulatory agencies work.
But in the context of a rock concert, the source argues it's being used as something else.
Oh, yeah. It's being used as a shorthand for the apocalypse is coming. It's a bogeyman.
So she stops the music, kills the whole vibe of the show to warn the crowd about this policy paper. But the source points out she wasn't just talking. She wasn't speaking from the heart.
No, she was reading from a literal piece. And not just, holding it, glancing down at her notes. According to the source, someone else had to hold the script up for her, and she was squinting at it to read the word.
That is a tough look. It implies she didn't even know the talking points well enough to memorize them before going on stage.
And that's the core of the scripted outrage argument. The source suggests this is a huge indicator that the outrage isn't. If you are truly deeply passionate about a topic, something that keeps you up at night, usually you can speak about it off the cuff.
Or at least remember the main bullet points.
Right. Reading a script that somebody else is physically holding up for you, it just screams, I am being fed this line by my management or my PR team.
It feeds directly into that cynical narrative that these celebrities are just vessels for a message they might not even fully understand. But, okay, if Hayley Williams was sticking maybe a little too close to the script, our next subject, Ice-T, went completely off script. Or did he?
This is such a fascinating case study in branding versus reality. Ice-T, the man, the myth, the Law and Order star.
An icon. So Ice-T has this legendary, incredibly controversial song from 1992 called Cop Killer. It literally sparked nationwide protests back in the day.
Iconic.
During a recent live performance with his band Body Count, he changed the lyric. Instead of Cop Killer, he sang Ice Killer.
Now, the source immediately points out the branding here, which is just hilarious. His name is Ice-T. If you get on stage and saying, I'm an ice killer, what are you saying? Are you saying you're going to kill yourself? The source joke, do I kill killer? It becomes this semantic pretzel.
It really does. It sounds like a bad omen. But okay, what was Ice-T's explanations? He said, it just came out, right?
That was his claim. He said he was in LA, he saw IC raids happening, and in that moment of anger on stage, his brain just switched the lyrics. He claimed he didn't even know he was going to do it.
It was pure, spontaneous rage.
That's the story. And the source material is overwhelmingly skeptical of that claim. They argue this was 100% premeditated.
Okay, but hold on. I want to push back on the source here a little bit. Ice-T is a punk rock legend, right? He's the frontman of Body Count. Isn't the entire point of that genre of music that it is spontaneous and raw? Why is the source so convinced he couldn't have just felt the anger of the moment and squeaked one word on the fly?
That's a really fair question, and in a different context, I'd probably agree with you. But the source breaks this down from a very technical nuts and bolts production stamp. Think about a stadium tour or a major festival set.
Okay, lots of moving parts. Sound, lights, video screens.
Massive moving parts. You have lighting cues that are synced to specific beats in the song. You have a backing band that needs to know exactly when the chorus hits, when the bridge. The source argues that if you change a core iconic lyric like cop killer to ice killer, you risk throwing off the entire cadence and rhythm of the band unless they know it's coming.
So you're saying it's not just about a passionate frontman. It's about the logistics of the whole show. You can't just change the script when there are pyrotechnics involved.
Precise. The source frames it as calculated authenticity. It's designed to look like a spontaneous burst of righteous rage, but they suggest it was very likely rehearsed in the dressing room 3 hours prior to make sure the drummer didn't miss a...
But the bigger issue, the much bigger issue the source takes with Ice-T is what they call the law and order paradox.
This is the massive elephant in the room. Ice-T has played a cop, Detective Finn Tutuola, on Law & Order, SVU, for, what is it now, a gazillion seasons?
It's been decades. He is, for an entire generation of TV watchers, the face of TV police.
So the source asks a very simple, very valid question. How do you possibly reconcile playing a heroic cop on television for that long, collecting those massive residual checks, while simultaneously singing songs about killing law enforcement?
They phrased it so bluntly. Who better to play a cop than a guy who wants to kill cops? It's a level of cognitive dissonance that is genuinely hard to wrap your head around.
And the source offers a theory on this that goes really deep into Hollywood sociology. They start talking about the concept of the limousine liberal writers.
That's another one of those terms we hear all the time. Limousine liberal. Is that just an insult, or is there a specific sociology there that they're pointing to?
It's a specific archetype. It refers to wealthy, often upper-class progressive people who, metaphorically ride in limousines, who advocate for policies that primarily affect the working class, but they never actually have to live with the real-world consequences of those policies themselves.
And the source argues this specific worldview has totally taken over Hollywood writers' rooms.
Especially post-George Floyd, yeah. They argue it has a profound effect on the shows themselves.
What kind of effect?
They argue it leads to what they call self-hating writing. The theory is that the writers, who are often very wealthy and live in safe neighborhoods, don't actually understand law. Or worse, they're kind of ashamed of the very subject matter they're being paid to write about.
So they write characters who are also ashamed of their own job.
Exactly. They write these conflicted, self-loathing cop characters. And the source suggests that Ice-T fits perfectly into this new ecosystem because he embodies that contrast. He is the cop who seems to hate the system that he enforces on TV.
That's a really deep read on the state of network television. It's not just about Ice-T as an individual. It's about the entire industry trying to have it both ways.
That's the argument. They want to profit from what people call copaganda, these very popular cops, while at the same time signaling to the more progressive audience that they don't actually like cops.
It's a straddle. It allows the network to keep the ratings from the more traditional pro-police audience, while the actors can signal to the anti-police audience that they're one of the good ones.
It's a very precarious balancing act.
It is. But despite all of this heavy criticism, I have to note that the source actually admits they really like Ice-T on social media.
Yes, I love that part. They mention he's hilarious on X, formerly Twitter. He engages directly with his critics. He dunks on people who come after him.
And they were like, leave Ice-T alone, he's funny. It's this moment of grudging respect. Even when they completely disagree with his politics, they respect his Twitter game.
It shows that sometimes a charismatic personality can transcend the political myth. But okay. Let's move from someone who is at least funny online to someone whose persona is taking a very, very serious turn in this deep dive. The boss, Bruce Springsteen.
Bruce, the poet of the working man, the voice of New Jersey. The source discusses a new protest song he released. It's called Streets of Minneapolis.
Right. And immediately, right off the bat, the source critiques the creativity or lack thereof of the title.
Yeah, they were pretty merciless. They were like, dude, you already have Streets of Philadelphia, City of Ruins, Streets of Fire, and now Streets of Minneapolis.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit like he's running out of names for cities and streets.
It's a branding issue. It feels formulaic, but the content of the song is what drew the real fire from the source, the rhetoric.
He calls the president King Trump. He calls ICE agents occupiers and thugs, and he explicitly praises what the source describes as insurrectionist protesters.
It's a very aggressive, very confrontational stance, and it's interesting, the source commentators actually refused to sing the lyrics on their show.
Partly because they joked they didn't have the right rasp for it.
Which is a fair critique of one's own vocal range. I mean, Bruce has a very specific kind of gravel.
For sure. But they also said they were afraid of demonetization. They felt the rhetoric was so charged that simply repeating it out loud might get their video flagged by YouTube's algorithm.
And that right there tells you how intense the lyrics must be.
It shows you how polarized the language has become. You have this mainstream, iconic rock star, the guy who sings born in the USA at Super Bowls,
Yeah.
using language that, you could argue, justifies violence against federal agents.
Occupiers and thugs. I mean, that is classic dehumanizing language. It's the kind of language you use to justify resistance against a foreign enemy.
And speaking of resistance and open revolution, we have to talk about Giancarlo, the man himself, Gus Fring.
This was maybe the most theatrical and bizarre element of the entire source material. Giancarlo Esposito, a true Hollywood legend, an incredible actor known for Breaking Bad, The Mandalorian.
An icon of cool, menacing authority.
Exactly. And he comes out in an interview calling for open revolution.
He's talking about how rich old white men are suppressing people, haters to hate. He's using this very apocalyptic, almost comic book villain language.
But the source immediately points out the visual dissonance. While he is on camera calling for this bloody street revolution,
He's wearing an ascot.
an ascot and glasses.
You simply cannot call for a proletariat uprising while wearing a silk ascot. It just doesn't work visually. It's like wearing a tuxedo to a mud wrestling.
It brings up this old concept of radical chic. It's a term Tom Wolfe coined back in the 70s to describe wealthy socialites who adopt revolutionary politics as a kind of fashion statement.
And the source points out the deep contradiction. Here is a wealthy, successful actor who, by any definition, fits into the demographic of rich old men that he has criticized, calling for civil war.
They analyzed a specific quote that was wild. It says, "They don't even know that's what they're starting. They'll kill a 550 million, however, but the rest of a 5."
It's completely incoherent. It sounds like a monologue from one of his characters, not a serious political statement.
Which leads the source to their interviewer trap.
Yes, this is really interesting insight into how the media sausage gets made. The source speculates that Hollywood interviewers from big outlets like Variety or The Hollywood Reporter, they kind of pressure these actors into saying these.
How so? What's the mechanism?
Well, imagine you're a reporter. You need a juicy headline. You need click. So you ask a very loaded question about the current political climate. The actor on the other side of the table feels this pressure to say something profound or provocative. They don't want to sound boring or uninformed.
So they just ramp it up. They escalate the rhetoric to sound passionate.
Exact. The source suggests that actors might say these stupid things, as they put it, just to generate clicks for the article, or because they feel like they have to in order to seem intellectual and engaged.
And then, as the source jokes, they go back to their air-conditioned trailer, sit down, and just facepalm. Why did I say that? Why did I just call for a civil war? I'm just an actor.
It's the trailer regret, the sudden realization that you just spouted a bunch of nonsense because a camera was pointed at you.
The source even had this great joke about it. They said, if a real Marxist revolutionary walked up to Esposito on the street and said, "Okay, comrade, the time is now. Let's start the revolution," Esposito would probably panic and say, whoa, I'm not really a revolutionary, but I played one on TV once.
It perfectly encapsulates the actor persona. The line between the role they play and their actual reality has become completely blurred. They are performing revolution, not living it.
So we've dissected the ultimatum, the ice out, the location paradox, scripted outrage, and the ascot-wearing revolution. The big question, how does a regular person, how does you, the listener, how do you consume media in this climate without going crazy?
The source offers what they call a sanity strategy, and I think this is really helpful for anyone feeling overwhelmed by all this stuff. Their core advice is to start looking at Hollywood as a simple business transaction.
Explain what they mean.
Basically, you have to consciously, actively separate the product from the person selling. The source explicitly states, quote, "None of the stupid dreck that I just heard him say makes him any less good of an actor."
So they're refusing to boycott.
Completely. They say, we are still going to watch John Wick. We are still going to watch Giancarlo Esposito's next project. They refuse to let the politics ruin the entertainment.
It's a conscious choice to say, I am paying for a story. I am paying for a performance. I am not paying for your political guidance.
Exactly. And the other part of the strategy is to understand the why behind all this. They acknowledge that for many of these celebrities, talking about ICE or revolution is it's what they're supposed to be talking about in their it's a status maintenance.
It's signaling to the rest of the industry, to the casting directors and producers, I am safe. I am on the right team. You can keep hiring. When you understand it as a career survival strategy or just another PR move, it becomes less personally infuriating and more, I don't know, almost pity.
Or at least more understandable. It's just a mechanism of the industry. It takes the personal sting out of it. They aren't personally attacking you with their statement. They're just playing the game to keep their careers.
So after all that, what does this all mean for us, for the listeners trying to navigate this landscape?
I think it raises a massive question about the nature of celebrity influence. We look at these people and we see them wielding this gigantic platform with millions of followers. But what the source material suggests is that this influence is actually incredibly brittle. It's fragile.
It's disconnected from reality. When you have millionaires telling working class people to skip a day's pay, or people in the safest, most exclusive neighborhoods calling for street fight, that credibility gap just widens and widens until...
And yet,
Yeah,
we keep watching their movies. We keep listening to their music.
we do.
So, okay, here's a final provocative thought to leave you with, something to chew on. We've talked a lot about separating the art from the artist. The source says they can do it. But can you, really? When an artist like John Leguizamo explicitly looks you in the eye and tells you, do not watch my movies if you disagree with me, and you watch it anyway, are you winning that exchange?
Or are you just validating their platform and their relevance, regardless of what they... Is the ultimate act of rebellion to ignore their request and enjoy their art on your own terms? Or is the only way to truly send a message to just turn the screen off for good?
That is the question. Can you truly separate the art from the artist when the artist themselves is screaming at you not to? Something to mull over the next time you queue up a movie.